by now people are well aware of the revelations that the Voice of the World has made in relation to the so-called Osama bin Laden videotapes that were allegedly found by the United States in Iraq in October 2001 and released to the public in December of 2001, and it's been determined absolutely without any misunderstandings whatsoever that the videotape in its entirety is a fraud and a fabrication. The fact of the matter is, the person in the videotape is not Osama bin Laden. That has been established unequivocally by the Voice of the World. If the person is not Osama bin Laden, then it means that the tape in its entirety and every piece of information, every piece of footage, every piece of audio contained in the tape is a fraud and a fabrication. So why would it be that Bush would go to so much trouble to produce this piece of evidence which was allegedly going to show the guilt of Osama bin Laden in the attacks of 9/11? People will recall that when requested to provide the evidence that Osama bin Laden was involved in the attacks or Afghanistan to the United States Congress, Bush refused to provide any evidence at all. Further than that, Bush made every attempt to make sure that there was no investigation of the evidence, no investigation of what really happened in America on September the 11th, 2001. So with regard to the Osama bin Laden videotape, it's quite clear that the tape was produced in an attempt to try and prove the guilt of bin Laden in having committed the attacks. So we have a very serious situation. Bush refuses to provide any evidence to the Congress or to the rest of the world. Afghanistan was not involved, but he was going to invade and attack Afghanistan anyway. We have fraudulent videotapes that have been produced to prove allegedly that Osama bin Laden was responsible. And then we have the revelations provided by the FBI translator, Sybil Edmonds, who had seen documents which left no misunderstanding in her mind that Bush and the administration had more than sufficient evidence and more than sufficient warning of some sort of attack that was going to take place. As can be seen, Bush deliberately did nothing to prevent the attacks, remained silent, refused to inform the American people at all of any warnings that they had received. And by doing so, by remaining silent, he has committed a very serious offence. By maintaining his silence means that he has facilitated the attacks taking place. He has become an accessory to the attacks in his refusal to warn the American people. I think it's absolutely clear now to millions of people around the world that the Bush and the United States had an agenda which basically meant that in facilitating the attacks, in permitting them to take place, gave the Bush license to be able to go off anywhere in the world and to invade or to attack whoever and wherever they wanted to, all on the premise that they were fighting a war against terrorism, on the premise that they had to invade Afghanistan to enable the capture of Osama bin Laden. And when it came to Bush's State of the Union address in January of 2002, Osama bin Laden's name was not even included anywhere in the entire address. And this was well after the invasion of Afghanistan in October. No mention of bin Laden whatsoever in the address. And when one of the chief military generals was asked as to how long he thought it might take to capture Osama bin Laden, he said, and quote, "Well, that's not what we're here for. If they're not there to capture Osama bin Laden, if they're not there to capture and bring to justice anybody who was supposed to have been responsible for the attacks on 9/11, why were they there?" We are told, allegedly, that the 19 hijackers, for the most part, came from Saudi Arabia. There's been no evidence anywhere produced by Bush to demonstrate that any of those people that allegedly committed the offence from Saudi Arabia had any affiliation with Osama bin Laden. And the fact is that UMAT, a newspaper in Pakistan, interviewed Osama bin Laden after 9/11, and the interview is contained within the Voice of the World website, and people can see very clearly Osama bin Laden makes it absolutely clear in no uncertain terms that he had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. So the fact is, if Osama bin Laden or any other person or organisation who had a vested interest in the success of 9/11 surely would have no hesitation in taking responsibility for the event if in fact they are the people who were responsible for it. But more particularly, when Osama bin Laden says, "I've had nothing whatsoever to do with the event," why would he produce a videotape claiming to do just that? It's just a nonsense, a total nonsense from start to finish. So, coming forward to 2003, we have the criminal invasion and illegal invasion of Iraq. We knew before, we've known then, and we've known since that there were no weapons. There was no justification for the invasion. And we know that Iraq and Saddam Hussein were not involved in any terrorism. We know that Saddam Hussein wasn't involved in any way with 9/11. And we now have the claim that Benazir Bhutto made in her final interview with David Frost that Osama bin Laden was dead, that he'd been murdered. This is consistent with the fact that for all of these years we've heard nothing from Osama bin Laden. Nobody's seen him, nobody's heard from him, and it seems to be quite clear that there's every possibility that he is dead and that he's no longer there. But when you look at the mainstream media and all of the reports that are made in the media and the press in the UK and in the US, nearly every event is attributed to Osama bin Laden, even up to the current day.